Okay. Before I start, tonight's class is I'm sponsoring it. Today was my father's 20th yahrzeit. In Neshama having Aliyah. So today's class is sponsored in his memory. And at 9 o'clock, those who want to stay on for a few minutes, I'll just talk a little bit about my father's life and his accomplishments, and if anybody's interested in staying at 9 o'clock for a few minutes. Anyway, this week is Parsha's Terumah. It deals with the construction of the Mishkan, construction of the temporary Beis Hamikdash, so to speak. And there's a famous pasuk at the beginning of the Parsha that's brought down very, very often in Chassidus in many, many places. And that is, Va'asu li migdosh v'shachanti b'seichem. Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, you should make for me a migdosh, a sanctuary, which, by the way, refers to the Mishkan. Saint Gemara says, Mishkan and migdosh, temporary, permanent, they're all interchangeable. V'shachanti b'seichem, and I will dwell in their midst. So we have, in the beginning of the Parsha, the mitzvah that Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu to build the Mishkan. That is in the Parsha of Terumah and Teshuvah, this coming week and the next week. And then the way Moshe Rabbeinu repeats it over to the Jews, that's later on in Chumash in the Parsha of Vayakel and Pekudei. So Terumah Teshuvah is the way Hashem is commanding Moshe Rabbeinu to build the Mishkan, and Vayakel Pekudei is the way actually Moshe Rabbeinu is giving it over to the Yidden, to the Jews, of how to build the Mishkan. Now, there's three opinions between the Zohar and the Medrash. There's three opinions. When did this happen? In other words, one opinion is, like the Zohar says, Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu the commandment of building the Mishkan before they sinned in the golden calf. Even though in 2 weeks we talk about Kisisa, the golden calf, the Egel. But according to the Zohar, Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu the commandment of building the Mishkan before the sin of the Egel. Another opinion is Hashem commanded Moshe Rabbeinu to build the Mishkan after the Egel. Okay? One is before the Egel, before the sin of the golden calf, and one is after the golden calf. And then there's a third interesting opinion. Hashem told it to Moshe Rabbeinu before the Egel, but Moshe Rabbeinu told it to the Jews after the Egel, which means that the Egel was in middle of the Jews being told by Hashem and then by Moshe Rabbeinu. So it's very important to keep this in mind because there's a number of issues that will clarify what's going on in the Parsha with this understanding. One opinion says it was before the Egel, one opinion says it was after the Egel, and one opinion says it was during the Egel, basically, during the golden calf. But now we have, based on this, let's understand a few things in the Parsha. Hashem told him the Jews should bring 13, 15, depends how you count them, objects for the Mishkan. Okay, the first thing Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, V'zei satruma asher tikchu me'itam. This is the uplifting, and he says like this: Zahav, Kesef, Unacheshes, gold, silver, and copper. And then he goes into the various different materials. Okay? So the commentators all ask a very simple question. Gold, I understand why they needed the Mishkan. Silver, I understand why they needed it in the Mishkan. They're good quality materials. In fact, the Medrash says the world wasn't worthy to have gold. The Medrash says the world itself was not worthy to have gold. But because Hashem needed gold for the Mishkan, he dumped it already into the rest of the world. But really, the only purpose of gold was for the Mishkan. There's a very interesting Gemara in Bava Metzia. Okay, let me just finish this point. But the question is, why copper? Copper is not a good material. It's not an expensive material. It's a cheap material. Silver is expensive. Gold is expensive. Copper is not expensive. Why in the world would Hashem want to build a Mishkan from nechoshes, from copper. What's wrong with gold and silver? So let me explain like this. There's an argument in the Gemara Bava Metzia. What is better, gold or silver? One opinion says gold is better because gold is a more expensive material. Bottom line, gold is much more valuable than silver. The other opinion, the Gemara says no, silver is more valuable because silver is currency. Gold can't be used as currency, it's too expensive. If you want to buy something, the currency, like even today, like years ago, was gold. Was silver. So there's an argument that the Gemara, what's better? Is gold better or silver better? We find another interesting argument in the Gemara Brachas. Who is better, a Tzadik or a Baal Teshuvah? Who is higher? A Tzadik who never sins or a Baal Teshuvah that sins and does Teshuvah? So one opinion the Gemara says, a Tzadik is greater than a Baal Teshuvah. He never sins. Another opinion the Gemara says, no, B'makim shebali Teshuvah aimdim, in the place where the Bali Teshuvah stand, even the complete Tzadikim can't stand there. The halacha is, by the way, the Rambam rules in Hilchos Teshuvah that a Baal Teshuvah is greater than a Tzadik. Okay? So you have an argument in the Gemara like this. Is gold better or silver better? And you have an argument in the Gemara, is a Tzadik better or a Baal Teshuvah is better? So it's explained in Sfarim and Chassidus. Gold is a Baal Teshuvah and silver is a Tzadik. Silver is a Tzadik, gold is a Baal Teshuvah. Why? Silver is whitish. Gold is reddish. White symbolizes purity. Gold symbolizes reddish, not like copper, which is more red, but gold has a reddish tint to it. But it's extremely valuable gold. So therefore, it's explained like this. The word kesef, besides meaning silver, we say in davening, in Yedid Nefesh, nichseif nichsafti. Or David HaMelech says in Tillim, nichsefa v'gam kol sanafshi. Nichsefa, which is from the root of kesef, means longing, desire. Nichseif nichsafti, liris teferes uzech. I have a longing to see Hashem's glory, we say in Yedid Nefesh. David HaMelech says in Tillim, nichsefa v'gam kol sanafshi. I have this desire, and my soul is longing to you, Hashem. And silver is whitish. So therefore, silver represents a tzaddik, and gold, which is a little reddish, which symbolizes sin, represents the Baal Teshuvah. Nechoshes, copper. The root of nechoshes is nachash, snake, original sin. The chet of Eitzadas, which is the source and origin of all sins. So these three materials, kesef, zahav, and nechoshes, or zahav, kesef, and nechoshes, represent three different types of Jews. The silver represents the tzaddik Jew, who's whitish, never sinned. The gold represents the Baal Teshuvah, and in that, like we said, the argument of the Gemara Bava Metzia is silver better or is gold better, and the Nechoshes represents the sinful Jews. In fact, the Klei Yakar explains next week's Parsha when he speaks about the garments of the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol had the breastplate that was called the Choshen, and the Klei Yakar explains Choshen is the letters of Nachash. So the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol actually forgave the sin of the Nachash, the sin of original sin. So Hashem comes to the Jewish people and he says like this, I want you to build a Mishkan for me. I want you to build a Mishkan for every single different type of Jew. I want a Tzadik Jew involved. I want a Baal Teshuvah Jew involved, and I even want the Rasha involved. Every Jew has to build their own personal Mishkan, their own personal Beis HaMikdash, their own personal Mishkan for Hashem. Because the Pasuk says, as we mentioned before, Va'asuli Migdash v'shachanti b'seicham. And everybody knows the famous question, Shalah HaKadosh Reshes Chochma Da'al Shich, and Chassidus brings it down in many, many Maimarim. It should have said grammatically, Va'asuli Migdash v'shachanti b'seichai, in its midst. Why does it say b'seicham, in their midst? So Chazal tell us, b'seich kol echad ve'echad, within every single individual Jew, a Jew needs to build a Mishkan. And Hashem says, you think you're a Tzadik? You still need to build a home for me. You think you're a Baal Teshuvah? You still need to build a Mishkan for me. Even the Rasha, Hashem says, you think you're a Rasha, so you say, who am I to build a home of Hashem? Hashem says, no, I want Nechoshes. I want the sinning Jew to be part of the Mishkan. And therefore we find an interesting thing. These are the three opinions when Hashem told Moshe about the Mishkan. If it was told before the golden calf, before the Egel, before the Jews sinned, after Matan Torah, there were tzaddikim. If it was way after Yom Kippur, after the golden calf, then the Jews were Bali Teshuvah. If it was in the middle, like we said, before and after, in the middle was the Egel. So there was while the Jews were Rishoyim. So that's the three opinions when Hashem told the Jews to build a Mishkan. And it's not really, you don't have to even say they're arguing, because the question is, when did he do it? Did he do it before, after, in the middle? Well, it's a fact. It's not a halach, it's a fact. Did he do it before? Did he do it in the middle? Did he do it after? The answer is all three are right. Hashem told them before, meaning there's a level of the Mishkan that Hashem says, I want Tzaddikim to be active in, Kesef. There's a level of the Mishkan I want Bali Teshuvah to be involved in. That's the level of Zohav. There's a level of the Mishkan I want even the wicked people to be part of, because they're Nachash. They also need to build a Mishkan for Hashem. So this is, therefore, you have the three opinions. Number one, why there are three major materials, silver, gold, silver, and copper. You have the three commandments before, during, and after. And now everything fits into play of how Hashem wants every single Jew to create this Mishkan as a dwelling place and a home for Hashem. There's another interesting part. This the men might get it better because they're more involved in Torah reading. The word Terumah, okay. The Pasuk says at the beginning of the Parsha, the Pasuk begins, David al b'nei Yisrael v'yikhu li Terumah. Take, they're translating literally, take me Terumah. Li means for me. Take me Terumah. So first of all, grammatically it should have said, V'yikhu elai Terumah, avuri Terumah. Li Terumah sounds like Yeshiva Bacher's English. Take me Terumah. Okay? And another question which is asked, the Mefarshim asked, it should say V'yitnu li Terumah. They should give me a Terumah. What does it mean? Hashem is telling Moshe Rabbeinu to tell the Jews, take from me a Terumah. The Jews are not taking the Terumah. The Jews are giving the Terumah. It should say V'yitnu avuri or elai or whatever the Terumah. They should give a Terumah. Why does it say take Terumah? And the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, the word Terumah is the word Torah with a mem in it. Right? Torah, Terumah is Torah mem. That's what the word Terumah is. What does it mean? V'yikchu li terumah. Now, the Rebbe says in Tanya, it means Eisi atem loichim. When a Jew learns Torah mem terumah, when a Jew learns Torah, v'yichuli, they take me. They become one with Hashem. Because Hashem and Torah is one. What is Torah? Hashem's wisdom. When a person learns Torah, like we learned in Tanya, in Parakeh, that when Hashem's wisdom is in my head, so what do I have in my head? Godliness, God. So the Torah is telling us the Yikhu li means Eisi. Eisi means the Yikhu Eisi Terumah, meaning when you learn Torah, Hashem says you become one with me. So, and also we'll learn in a second, I'll explain why it says the Yikhu, not the Yitnu. But
so what's the mem? So what's the extra mem?
Torah mem, Torah that was given in 40 days.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I mean, I should have said it. I'm sorry. You're right. Truma is Torah mem, which is Torah which was given in 40 days. Thanks for bringing that up. But it says like this: Zeisa Truma shetikhu meitam zahav, chesef, and necheshes. Okay, gold, silver, and copper. This is, what does the pasuk say? This is the Truma, meaning when do you take out the Torah? When do you take out the Torah to be read? So it's Zahav, Kesef, and Acheshes. Now, what are the letters Zahav? Zahav is Zayin, Hey, and Beis, right? Zayin is 7, which refers to Shabbos. Hey and Beis is Monday and Thursday. So Zahav refers to when do you read the Torah? Shabbos, Monday, and Thursday. Next word, Kesef. Kesef stands for Kippurim. Chaf stands for Kippurim, which is Yom Kippur. Samach stands for Sukkos. Pei stands for Purim and Pesach. Okay? And Necheshes, the Nun is Ner, candle, which means Hanukkah. Ches stands for Chodesh, Rosh Chodesh, which also includes Rosh Hashanah, which is also Rosh Chodesh. Shin stands for Shavuos, Shmini Atzeres, and Simchas Torah. And Tav stands for Ta'anis, fast day. These 3 words include within them every time you take out the Terumah, the Torah mem. Every time you take out the Torah is Zahav, Kesef, and Necheshes. And again, Zahav is Zayin, Hey, Beis, is Shabbos, the 7th day, Monday and Thursday, or Thursday and Monday. Chaf is Kippurim, Yom Kippur. Samach is Sukkos. Pei is Purim and Pesach. Nun is Ner, which is Hanukkah. Ches is Chodesh, Rosh Chodesh, which includes also Rosh Hashanah. And Shin stands for Shavuos and Shmini Atzeres. And Tav stands for Ta'anis. So these are all the days of the year. There's no other day of the year that you take out a Torah. These are the only days of the year that a person is taking out Torah. Now, we asked before, why doesn't it say V'yitnu li Terumah? They should give me a Terumah. Speak to the Yidden, and they should give me a Terumah. They should not take Terumah. And here, the Rebbe brings down in a Sikh a remarkable lesson in life. And that is like this. When a person in life, Hashem set up the world, Mashpia and Mekabel, giver and receiver. Everything is like that. Husband's giver, wife receiver. Parents give, children receive. Teachers give, students receive. Boss gives, workers take. The whole setup of the world is in a way of giving and receiving. Mashpia and Mekabel. Giving and receiving. Now, When it comes even to wealthy people versus poor people, Hashem set up the world in that way that there are people that can give tzedakah and there are people that have to take tzedakah. That's the way Hashem set up the world. And the Torah is teaching us the yikhu, even if you have to be the one to take, you're not the one that can give. You can only be the one that takes. And by the way, that doesn't only mean money. It could be knowledge. It could be help. It could be whatever. A person has to take. In life, there's givers and takers. Some people, Hashem destined them as givers. Some people, Hashem destined to takers, as receivers. Not takers, I don't like the word takers, receivers. So Hashem says to the Jew, you should know, the yikhu, if you ever have to take, Hashem said, leave. That's because I want it that way. It's part of your mission for whatever reason is. Hashem makes people be able to give, whether it's knowledge, help, money, whatever it may be. They're givers and receivers. Hashem says, even a receiver, don't feel bad. If you're a student, don't feel bad that you're not the teacher. Because this is what Hashem wants the person to do. And therefore, there's a very interesting Gemara. The Gemara says, Yosef mimasha asher eise im ha'ani balabayis eise im ha'ani ha'ani eise im balabayis. The Gemara says, the poor man, by taking tzedakah, does more for the rich man than the rich man does for the poor man. The Gemara says, Yosef mi balmasha balabayis eise im ha'ani ha'ani eise im balabayis. The ba'ani does more for the rich than the rich does for the poor. Why? The rich gives him a few bucks, but he gives him the opportunity to do a mitzvah. The Gemara says, one of the great sages of the Gemara said, I learned a lot from my rabbis. I learned more from my friends. I learned the most from my students. So even though it's seemingly the students are the receivers, but in essence, they're not, because this is what Hashem wanted. So they're making the teacher smarter. When a student asks a question and the teacher has to find an answer, and they have questions and answers and discussion, it makes the teacher smarter. So the Rebbe says in the Sikha, the yikhu li terumah, a person needs to understand that even when you are receiving, you should know this is from Hashem, and don't feel bad about it. This is what Hashem wants from you. Hashem wants this person to give. Hashem wants this person to receive. But don't think it in a negative way, because you as receiver are doing more for the giver than the giver is doing for you. The student does more for the teacher than the teacher does for the student, and the poor man does more for the rich man than the rich man does for the poor man. And that's why it says that expression of a yikhu. Okay, now Hashem is building a Mishkan. There's a famous question in the book of Malachim, when Shlomo HaMelech finished building the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, in the book of Malachim, the home of God. So Shlomo HaMelech said, he spoke to Hashem, and he said the following: Halei Hashemayim u'shmei Hashemayim lo yechalkelucha v'af ki abayis hazeh. There's a pasuk in Malachim that says like this. Shlomo HaMelech says to Hashem, God, I don't get it. You wanted us to build you a home, we did. But Halei Hashemayim u'shmei Hashemayim, the heavens and things, Shmei Hashemayim above the heavens. Lo yechalkelucha, cannot handle you. You're too great for the heavens. And this little building of the Beis Hamikdash or the Mishkan is going to be your home. How could that be? How could that be? Shlomo HaMelech was in wonder, in awe. How is it possible that the universe is not big enough for Hashem and this building is the home of Hashem? How could that be? And why does Hashem need a home in this physical world? Why does he need it here? So explanation is remarkable. Okay? Basically, Shlomo Melech is asking, how can a limited building, God, be your home? How can it be? So what's the explanation? The explanation is like this. We discussed this already in previous classes. If somebody asks you, is Hashem spiritual or physical? A person will answer, obviously God's spiritual, he's not physical. If somebody asks you, is God finite or limited? I'm sorry, finite or infinite? Is he limited or unlimited? A normal person will say God's unlimited, of course. If somebody will ask you, is God nature or supernatural? A person's going to say, of course, God's supernatural. But all of that is super incorrect. Totally incorrect. But really incorrect. Why is it incorrect? Because if you say that Hashem is infinite, there's a problem with that. Number one, you limit him that he's infinite and not finite. That's also a limitation. The fact is, infinite is a limitation. It's infinite and not finite. It's unlimited and not limited. That's a limitation. And secondly, if Hashem is unlimited, infinite, how in the world can he create limited? You can't create what you're not. If Hashem is spiritual, you're limiting him that he's not physical. So you can't say Hashem is spiritual, because then how can he create physical? And secondly, you're limiting him that he's spiritual, not physical. If Hashem is only supernatural, not natural, again, you're limiting him, he's supernatural, not natural. That limitation can't exist. So what's the answer? Hashem is not infinite, and he's not finite, and he's not spiritual, and he's not physical. He's above it all. Hashem is above spiritual and physical. Hashem is above finite and infinite. Hashem is above miracle and nature. And because we can't get it, by the way, it's impossible. We don't even understand infinite. To understand what it means above infinite, that he's above finite and infinite, above both, is we can't. It's humanly impossible for us to understand it. But the fact is, Hashem is not spiritual, not physical, not limited, and unlimited. Therefore, Hashem can make infinite. Hashem can make finite. Hashem can make spiritual. He can make physical. He can make everything both. But you know where you see the real greatness of Hashem? When he combines limited and unlimited together. That's much greater than infinite. Infinite is a limitation that is unlimited and not limited. Right? Infinite is unlimited, not limited. That's a limitation. The ultimate, and this is very easy. I mean, we don't understand it, but we understand the concept. The ultimate greatness, where do you see the ultimate greatness of Hashem? When he combines physical and spiritual together, infinite and finite together, and spiritual and physical together. And therefore, Chassidus explains, we'll talk maybe more about next week when we go about Purim, a miracle in nature, like Purim was, Esther's the queen, and Mordechai the Kissinger, and if you want to know, Purim was a miracle melubish b'teva, in nature. And Chassidus explains, a miracle in nature, which is a combination of two opposites, is even greater than a real miracle. It's greater than Kriyas Yamsuf, than splitting of the sea. Why? Splitting of the sea, Hashem broke nature. Purim is a combination of physical and supernatural simultaneously. That's where you see the ultimate level of Hashem. And this is what the Beis Hamikdash was about, and this is what the Mishkan was about. When Shlomo Melech said, God, you're so infinite, the heavens can hold you because you're so infinite, Hashem's answer to him was, that's why I want the Beis Hamikdash. That's why I want a Mishkan. What happened in the Beis Hamikdash and the Mishkan? There was a unity between infinite and finite simultaneously. Where do you see this in the Beis Hamikdash? So the Gemara says in Yuma, is brought down all over the place. Makim ha'arein eina min amida. The Aron in the Holy of Holies, the Ark, the Aron Kodesh, that held the luches and the broken luches and the Sefer Torah. It wasn't part of the measurement, which means like this. The Holy of Holies, the Kodesh HaKadoshim, which housed the Aron with the Keruvim, okay, was 20 amas, 20 cubits wide. The Ark, the way the Torah describes it here, was 2.5 cubits wide. So you put a 2.5 cubit box Aron in middle of a room, okay? Yet the room was 20 amas. From one end of the ark to the end of the room was 10. From the other end of the ark to the end of the room was 10. And the ark took up 2.5. And yet the whole room was 20. It wasn't because the contractor made a cockeyed shaped room. What happened in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the home of God, in the Mishkan, Hashem said, I want, you know what my home is? When it's really me, not the infinite me, not the finite me. You want to know who I really am? In the Beis Hamikdash, in the Mishkan, when you have the togetherness of place and above place. In other words, 10 plus 10 plus 2.5 equals 20. That is the ultimate revelation of God's greatness. And that's why it's the home of God. And therefore, what Hashem really wanted was a Mishkan built from physical objects. And he said, that's my home. Because the fact that me, the infinite Hashem, can be in a limited, confined area, that is the ultimate level of Kedusha. The combination of the infinite and the finite simultaneously. And that's what made it God's home. It's really a pasuk in Tehillim. In Kapitel Kuv Beis, I think it is. David HaMelech says, Va'atahu, God, you are who you are. Ushnosecha lo yitamu. Your years never end. That is a contradictory statement. Years is limited. If it's limited, it must end. There's no such thing as endless limited, because if you take away one, it is one less. What does David HaMelech say in these three words in Tehillim? Va'atahu, you are God, and therefore, because you are Ata, the essence, your years, meaning your finite, is infinite. Your time is timeless. That's the greatness of that's the real greatness of Hashem. And therefore, the Beis Hamikdash was built in a limited building, and everything was physical, and that's what it was. Okay, next. The Mefarshim say, by the way, this mitzvah of Va'asuli Migdash v'shechanti b'seicham is not only one-time mitzvah, it's a continuous mitzvah for all times. What is a continuous mitzvah for all time? There's two aspects. The Gemara says that the shuls, the body can see it, the shuls are a mini Beis Hamikdash. So when a Jew builds a shul or makes a shul, they're actually building a Beis Hamikdash for Hashem. And the Gemara says, especially, the Gemara says in Megillah, now that there is no temple, now that there is no Beis Hamikdash, there is no Mishkan. What is the Beis Hamikdash today? The Gemara says, the Bati Knesiyas, the Bati Medrashis, the shuls and the yeshivas in Golus. That is the Beis Hamikdash for Hashem. That's number one. Number two, the real Beis Hamikdash for Hashem is in each one of us. The Shechanti B'Seicham within each one of us. Now, which means as follows. If I have to create a Mishkan within me, okay, that means everything that went on in the Mishkan, in the Beis Hamikdash, have to be inside in me. It has to be within me. I'm building a Beis Hamikdash within me. Now every Jewish home is a Beis Hamikdash. Mikdash Ma'at says. In fact, the Rebbe once spoke an interesting sikha to women, and the Rebbe was speaking about, women generally don't like cleaning and all that stuff. So the Rebbe said, if you would be given the opportunity to clean the Beis Hamikdash, if Mr. Kohen Gadol calls you up one day and says, Mrs. So-and-so, I would like to ask you, would you like to come and clean the Beis? Everybody would run to do it, to clean Hashem's home. Are you kidding? Who wouldn't want to do it? I mean, by Chassidim, somebody says, come, would you like to clean the Rebbe's room? Of course, they would run to do it. The Rebbe says you should know when you clean your home is a Beis Hamikdash, you are cleaning a Beis Hamikdash. You're tidying up the Beis Hamikdash. This is the Beis Hamikdash we have today in everybody's home. Therefore, everything that went on in the Mishkan, in the Beis Hamikdash, we find in our heart, in ourselves. For instance, the main things in the Beis Hamikdash were the Mizbeach, the altar. You had the menorah. You had two menorahs, in fact. You had the shulchan with the showbread. You had the aron in the Holy of Holies. Those were the primary things in the Beis Hamikdash. The Mizbeach, the shulchan, the menorah. God believe I left out menorah, and the Mizbeach and the aron. Which means everybody in their own home has to have a Mizbeach, aron, menorah, and shulchan. Not only physically in your home, we're not talking about that. We're talking about within each one of us. Whatever the Mizbeach purpose was, whatever the menorah's purpose was, the shulchan, the aron, that's what it's all about. Now, let's start with the Mizbeach, the altar. What was the purpose of the outer altar? The inner altar was the golden altar that they brought the incense every day. The outer altar, the big one, the copper one, the earthenware one, whichever one, which was made very big, and that's where they brought all the sacrifices. Now, what does it mean bringing sacrifices? So in a literal sense, it means you take an animal, you slaughter it, you take the blood, you squirt it on the altar, and then you take the meat and you bring it up as a sacrifice. Okay? What does that mean in our lives? In our lives means we need to bring a sacrifice. A sacrifice doesn't mean killing ourselves. It doesn't mean killing an animal. It means sacrificing means as follows. The animal that they brought as a korban represents the animal soul of the Jew. The nefesh habamis, the Yetzer Hara, whatever you want to call it. That is the Mizbeach that needs within the Jew, the Mizbeach, the altar that sacrifices our animalistic desires, the blood of the animal, meaning the life of the animal, the enthusiasm of animalistic things, the meat of the animal. you have to bring it on the altar. But it was a very interesting point with the altar. The Gemara says, and also in Yuma, in the days of Shlomo HaMelech, Yacheles Yotza Min HaShemayim, Nofla Min HaShemayim, a coal, a fire, came down from heaven in the days of Shlomo HaMelech, Revutza Ka'ari, crouched like a lion, and that was the fire on the Mizbeach. Nevertheless, there's a pasuk in Chumash, Eish Tamid Tukad Ala Mizbeach, Mitzvah Lahavi Min HaHedyet. The people themselves had to bring a fire. In other words, on the Mizbeach was a joint fire. The fire that fell down from heaven, and the wood and the fire that the Jews had to bring. And both had to be. One without the other was no good. What does this represent in my personal Mizbeach? In my personal Mizbeach, that the Torah speaks about in this week's Parsha, there's a fire that every neshama has from God. You know, the Pintaliyid, the neshama, the fire, the connection to God, the Pintaliyid. Every Jew has an essence, which is the fire of God. Eish Yudke. Nevertheless, the Torah says, the fire that you have from heaven in your neshama is not enough. You have to bring your own fire. If you want to burn your animalistic temptations, your animalistic desires, your animalistic lifestyles, it's not enough just to have the neshama within you. You need to bring your own fire. You need to bring your own godly enthusiasm, and that's the way you get rid of the evil forces of the body. So therefore, you could talk about each one for an hour, but the Mizbeach simply represents taking our animalistic desires and sacrificing it to Hashem, meaning giving up a part of ourselves for Hashem. Meaning, I don't do what I want to do, I do what Hashem wants me to do. That is the Mizbeach within the Jew. The Oren, the Ark, obviously represents Torah. That's what it says in what was in the Ark, the Luches, both the broken Luches, the full Luches, the Sefer Torah. So Oren represents Torah. And it's an interesting thing. When the Torah tells us the measurements of the Ark, Torah says 2.5, 1.5, and 1.5. All half measurements. 2.5, 1.5, 1.5. Couldn't it be 2 and 4 and 3? Why halves? So the Musar Svarim say, because when a person is learning Torah, you need to feel that you're only a half. You don't know everything. You need to understand that Hashem is the second half. You know, Hashem is what gives us, and we are the second half. So that represents learning Torah in the home. Every home has to have learning Torah, classes, learning, whatever it may be. The next thing in the Mishkan was the Menorah. What was the Menorah? The Menorah was the 7 candelabra, the candelabra with 7 branches. And what was the job of kindling the Menorah? At night, you kindled the Menorah. What was that level of kindling the Menorah in ourselves? We don't have a Menorah. We have Hanukkah Menorah. We don't have a Menorah Beis Hamikdash. What does it mean kindling the Menorah in my personal home Mishkan? It means kindling all the 7 emotions that I have. Chesed, Gevura, the 7 emotional levels. The Ark, the Aron represents the intellect, Torah. The menorah represents light in all 7 levels, meaning every one of my love should be to God, and my fear should be to God, and my beauty should be to God, and my victory should be to God. It should all be kindled the Menorah in my house. And that's why there are 7 branches in the Menorah, because there are 7 different types of Jews. There are Jews that serve Hashem with love. There are Jews that serve Hashem with fear. There's Jews that serve Hashem with mercy. There's 7 different types of serving Hashem. And therefore, what is the avodah of the Jew? Aaron and Kohen have to kindle everybody's Menorah. But let's talk on a personal level. The 7 branches of the Menorah represent the 7 midas that I have to serve Hashem with love, have to serve Hashem with fear, I have to serve Hashem in all the proper ways. So that's the way I have to serve Hashem. That's kindling the Menorah in my personal base of English. So we have the Mizbeach is sacrificing my animalistic desires. The Aron is studying of Torah and knowing that I'm only a half, and therefore I have to learn from everybody because I'm only a half. And then you have the Menorah, which is the kindling of the neshama of every single Jew, every midah, every part of my neshama, the 7 attributes should be illuminated with the menorah. And the last, you have the shulchan. What does the shulchan represent? So the Rebbe says in another place, Menorah is ruchnius and the shulchan is gashmius. The Menorah is light, candle, which is spiritual, and the shulchan is the showbread, represents the shulchan, the table of the Jew, the parnasa of the Jew. You know, the physical needs of the person. What is the shulchan? The shulchan is the physical aspects of the house have to be made into a Mishkan. You eat, it has to be like you're eating in the base of Mikdash. You do whatever you do, you're doing in Hashem's home. If the base of Mikdash, if the Mishkan is my home, Hashem's home in me, so then I need the Mizbeach, I need the Menorah, I need the Aron, I need the Shulchan, I need everything. And when I do the avodah of each one of those, then I create a perfect Mishkan within me. And that's what Hashem wants. I will dwell in your midst. What?
Which is higher, the Torah or a person?
You mean Torah, the neshama?
Torah is also spiritual and physical, right?
Right.
And we are so which is higher, the Torah or us?
The neshama down here in a body, Torah is higher. Up there, pre-body, neshama is greater than Torah.
Rabbi, any insight about the Ketores?
Yeah, I could talk about the Ketores. Okay, yeah, we have a few minutes. What was unique, in fact, in Basi Lagani, the Rebbe writes there about the Beit Samir, what we just said, and he writes in Befrat Maisa Ketores. All the korbanos in the Beis HaMikdash were basically elevating kosher items to make them holier. They were not allowed to bring non-kosher animals as sacrifice. Everything had to be kosher, right? Because everything in all the avodah of the korbanos was not transforming total evil to kedusha. It was transforming. It's called klipas naiga, the neutral level of evil, to bring it to kedusha. The Ketores was very unique. The Gemara says there were 11 spices. We say those that say korbanos every day, twice a day before Shachris and Mincha. Va'achad asa samamonum hayuva. There were 11 spices, and the Siddur enumerates hatzariv, hatziper, nachelbon, lavein, mishkal, and then it says in the same continuation, v'imchiser echad mikol samamoneha. If a person lacked one of the 11, meaning a kohen brought the Ketores, he brought 10 out of the 11, chayev misa, capital punishment. Okay, now. One of the spices of the 11 was called chelbana. Okay, I don't know how you translate it into English, but it's called chelbana. The Gemara says about chelbana, reichei ra, it stunk. It had an awful, awful smell. So the question is, Why is Ketores is supposed to be a good smell, incense to make a good smell in the base of Mikdash, or for Hashem? Why in the world would they use a spice that had an awful taste, awful smell? And the answer is, like we said before, Hashem says that in order to have a spice for me in the base of Mikdash, every type of Jew needs to be included. You're going to exclude, pardon the expression, the stinky Jews, the smelly Jews, the sinful Jews. Hashem said, you know what? I'm not interested in that. Chayiv Misa. You're going to get capital punishment for leaving out the Chelbana. What does Hashem want? What happened in the Ketores? The uniqueness of the Ketores was that they took something, so to speak, evil, Chelbana, and that was also elevated to Kedusha. And therefore, when the Rebbe in Basi Lagani speaks about, the boards were called Kedesh, and therefore Sheker became Kedesh, and Shtus became Shitim, that transformation of foolishness to brilliance and the lies to truth. Where was that noticed the most in the Mishkan? Was in the Ketores. Because the Ketores took a Chelbana, the sinful Jew, and therefore the Gemara says, any fast that doesn't include the sinning Jews is not a fast. It's not acceptable fast. The Medrash says, Ilu by Matan Torah, Ilo yeshishim riboy chaser achas. If God forbid, when the Torah was given to the Jews, there would have been 600,000 minus one, Torah wouldn't have been given to the Jews. And the Rebbe explains, that means there were Jews that left Egypt carrying idols. There was a Jew that left Egypt with Pesel Micha, it was called, the idol of Micha. A Jew walked out of Egypt with Pesel Micha and stood at Har Sinai when Hashem was going to give the Torah. And Hashem says, if that Jew wouldn't have been there, I wouldn't have given the Torah to the Jews. Because what does Hashem want? And that's why the Ketores, in a certain respect, is holier than all the other Korbanos. All the other Korbanos took permissible things and made it holier. The Ketores symbolizes transformation of evil all the way to Kedusha. Okay, there's one more thing I want to mention. There's a lot more you could talk about. But when the Torah speaks about taking the gifts, so there are three things. The Rashi says at the beginning of the Parsha, there are three Terumahs that they have. That's why we give $3.50. There was Machzitz a shekel to buy Korbanos. There was Machzitz a shekel, another half a shekel. Everybody gave equally for the silver sockets that held up the boards of the Mishkan. And the last one was whatever anybody donated, whatever they wanted to donate. More or less, everybody was different. So there was the Machzitz a shekel for the sacrifices. Everybody was not allowed to give more. The Torah says clearly, the rich cannot give more, the poor cannot give less. The half a shekel for the Adonim, for the sockets that held up the boards of the Mishkan, also only half a shekel, not more, not less. So the Rebbe explains like this. These three things, sockets, Korbanos, and general gifts of the Mishkan are the three pillars the world stands on. Torah, Avoda, and Gemilas Chasadim. And the Rebbe explains like this. The foundation of a Jew's life is Torah. The sockets that hold up the whole Mishkan, all the boards of the Mishkan, that represents Torah. Machzis HaShekel. In that, every single Jew has an equal share in Torah. The saying Chalkeinu b'Sefer Sacha, every Jew has a letter in a Sefer Torah. No Jew can say Torah is more mine than yours. Every Jew has Torah equally. So everybody had to give a half a shekel. Then there was an equal half a shekel for Korbanos, which now we have davening instead of Korbanos. That's the half a shekel for the korbanos. And then the third thing, the milas chasadim, just general tzedakah, that refers to the donations everybody was able to make. So the Rebbe says the three terumas that Rashi says in the Medrash, the Gemara, that the three terumas the Torah is talking about. Okay, the Torah says three times the word teruma represents the teruma of the sockets, which represents Torah, the half a shekel, which represents korbanos, aveda, and the third one, which was unlimited, basically whatever anybody wanted to give, that refers to the milas chasadim, and that is unlimited. Everybody can do whatever they want. And these are the three pillars that the world is standing on. Okay, as I mentioned at the beginning, this class is in memory of my father's yahrzeit tonight. Today was the 20th yahrzeit of my father, who happened to pass away in Los Angeles, and so did my mother. And we'll talk. I just want to spend a few minutes. You don't trust me. If you go off, I will not be insulted. If you want to stay on, just talk a little bit about my father. He was a very prominent Rav in Chicago, a very prominent Chassid. My father himself was born, my mother was born in Boston, but my father was born in White Russia, which was Ukraine at that time. But he came to America when he was a young child, a few months old, I believe it was. First, they moved to Winnipeg, and then my grandfather was a sheikhet, a Charkova Chassid, a Chassid from the Charkova dynasty. So he was a sheikhet. They moved to Williamsburg. So my grandfather, whose name was Rabbi Yaakov, was known as Yankele the Sheikhet. That was how he was known. So my father, when he was young, learned in Torah V'das, because there were only two yeshivas then. There was Torah V'das in Williamsburg, and there was Chaim Berlin. Those were the two yeshivas. So my father didn't have any connection to Lubavitch at that time, because his parents were not Lubavitch. In fact, they didn't want him to be so religious, like in the Alter Hen. My grandfather had a beard and a kapata, but they wanted the kids to modernize out a little bit. So at the end of the 30s, the Chassidic Rebbe came to America to live in Tufshin, 1940. But in the last 2 years before that, the Chassidic Rebbe sent shluchim to America to set the groundwork for the previous Rebbe to move to America. So therefore, these Chassidim, there was Rabbi Mordechai Chayfetz, Rabbi Jacobson, Rabbi Simpson, Rabbi Shmuel Levit, and there were a lot of great Chassidim. And they would go in the various yeshivas and learn Chassidus with the Bachrim, and the yeshivas let them. They were very close to the concept of Chassidus, and they let them learn Chassidus. And slowly my father became very inspired with the teachings of Chassidus, and he would watch these Chassidish Jews, the way they lived, the way they washed the Netilas Yadayim for bread. He was so impressed how careful they were in the observance of mitzvahs. My father by nature was a Kabbalah's Elnik. He was acceptance of the yoke. He did what you were supposed to. He kept time better than me, by the way. He kept time to the minute. He was always meticulous in time. He never wasted time. He was always either learning or doing something. He never wasted time. And he was extremely organized. My father was very extremely organized. And when the Chassidic Rebbe came to America, my father was already very involved with the Chassidish Yidden. And when the Chassidic Rebbe came to America in Tes Adar Sheni, the 9th of the 2nd, that was the leap year, the 9th of the 2nd Adar in 1940, the Chassidic Rebbe turned a day after he came, he said to his Chassidim, I'm here 24 hours and there's no yeshiva yet. So they started 770 with 10 Bachrim. And my father was merited to be from the first 10 Bachrim that came from Torah V'das, and a few came from Chaim Berlin. And they started the yeshiva of in America in 770. And my father learned it for a few years until he got married. In middle of my parents' Sheva Brachas, even as Bachrim then, the Chassidic Rebbe would send Bachrim. My father as a Bachrim was sent to Worcester to help opening a yeshiva. And he was there. And there he met my uncle, who was the Shadchan, his wife and my mother were sisters. So but my father was in Worcester learning and teaching and opening yeshivas and so on. In the middle of my father's Sheva Brachas, he got a call from the Frierdiker Rebbe's office. He wants him to go to Rochester, New York to open a yeshiva. It's the middle of Sheva Brachas. So he went right away. He went to Sheva Brachas. He went to Rochester. He was in Rochester for a year. And then the Frierdiker Rebbe sent him to Chicago. We ended up to become a Rav there. And in one shul, then another shul. In the heyday of my father's shul in Chicago was the largest Orthodox shul in the entire Midwest. Now Chicago has many, many different big shuls. But in those days, he was, and my father had a lot of Mesidus Nefesh for Yiddishkeit. His parents did not want him to have a beard, and there was a time he didn't. And then when he finally decided he's going to grow a beard, regardless of what they wanted or not, but he wanted to grow a beard. And the previous Rebbe's secretary said to the previous Rebbe that Herschel Shusterman started growing a beard. The previous Rebbe said to the secretary who told him that, he said, I did not tell him to do it. And he is a pnimi. He told him very different praises about my father, that he does everything internally and he means it. So this is the way he started off, becoming his connection to Chabad and becoming a Chabad Rav in Chicago. And one of the many, in fact, it's interesting, I mentioned this in previous times, both my parents, who lived in Chicago for over 60 years, did not pass away in Chicago. They both passed away when they were visiting us in LA. My father came, it was Parsha B'Shalach 20 years ago, and he came to visit us. We happened to be in New York for a wedding and Kinnis HaShluchis, and my father was there. And then Saturday night, he ended up going to the hospital, and Gimel Adar, he passed away. My mother came for Pesach, because my father passed away 10 and a half years before my mother did. So my mother came to us for Pesach. She wasn't well. And in the middle of Pesach, she went into the hospital. And Bay's year, she passed away. So both my parents did not pass away in Chicago. And their doctor, who was Dr. Ira Weiss, who was about Teshuvah of my father, who was the Rebbe's doctor, he said, he told it to me when they passed away, whatever, he said, I want you to know your parents couldn't have died in Chicago because they did so much good there. The angel of death couldn't have gotten them there. They couldn't get them in the Chicago where they did so much good. The Gemara says a person who is loved by people is loved by Hashem. My father was a person that was loved. He was a big Rav, he knew how to learn, yet he dealt with all different types of people. Originally, his show had not from people at all. And he dealt with them, and he dealt with the from, and he dealt with the non-from people, and he dealt with the super from Rabbanim, and he was respected and loved by everybody. Which shows in Indian that he had to do something right. And he was meticulous about time. He never wasted time. In fact, I was thinking, he hacked into our heads, don't waste time. Always utilize time to the fullest. Don't waste time. And he always told us, be good to others. Never look down at anybody, no matter who they are. Always respect everybody. Treat them nicely. Just be a mensch, basically. And that's what he was. If you want to classify, besides the learning and everything else, he was a super mensch. And that's why he was respected by everybody. And he was loved by everybody in Chicago. And he has a lot of Bali Teshuvahs from over the years that are still talking about him. Whenever you meet them, they talk about them. I was in Florida a few weeks ago for a wedding. So Shabbos morning in Shul, the rabbi calls over a guy. He says, this guy, he used to live in Chicago in your father's shul. So I was out so many, but you told me the name. I said, I remember the name. And he's telling me about my father. There's a bunch of people in LA that lived in Chicago. He was respected by everybody, which shows that he did something right. So he should be a good Tibetan, and he should be a good advocate for everybody, and he should bring Mashiach. And
Amen.
this is a special time that Rebbe spoke about many times. The number 20 is Esrim is the numerical value of Keser, of a crown, and we should hope that he should be a good Tibetan. We should all be Zoichem very soon to be with Mashiach, and everybody from the past lives will be back with us.
Amen. Amen. Neshama le'aliyah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
very
you.
good week. Wednesday night, 8 o'clock, Tanya. Halacha and Tanya.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Rabbi.
No more people about this.
Neshama Shalom Aliyah.
Thank you very much.
Is the
Thank
show
you.
earlier?
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.